Hello, beautiful humans. So here we are back to watch Lori Vallow Daybell closing statements in the Lori Vallow Daybell trial. So if you're catching us live, we've got it. We've got the live feed starting here in just about probably 10 minutes or so. I believe that the live feed is still on its 30-minute delay. That is what we are anticipating. And right now, everybody in Arizona is back in the courtroom, I believe, after lunch break. They came back at 2:45. And so we're just waiting for the live feed to start here on my channel. I'll be sharing the screen with you so that we can definitely watch that together, the closing arguments. Now, what we just did this morning is that we went through the jury instructions. So we watched live together here on the channel to see the jury instructions. And sorry, as you can see, we're still just waiting for that live feed to start. And so I just have a couple of thoughts about jury instructions that I want to share with you as those instructions came in. Of course, the main thing that we want to know about the jury instructions. Hey, Tom, so good to see you. Thanks for being here. I hope your wife, Susan, is with you, and I hope you guys are doing well. Tom and Susan went back home to be with their family members, and so they're not in Arizona either. So I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything because Tom and Susan aren't there. And yes, Tom and Susan were a lifesaver for me the last couple of weeks. I definitely could not have done everything I did without them. They just were so kind and generous with their time and their space, and it was just amazing. So the jury instructions were a little dry, and it was a lot of rule of law and a lot of theory about law. But here are the things that stood out to me. First of all, about conspiracy, the standards for conspiracy are three things. One, they have to find that the defendant agreed with one or more person that they were going to commit a crime. And then the second one was the defendant has to intend to promote or assist another person in committing the crime. And then the third is that the conduct results in something that they know is a crime. And so basically they have to meet those three burdens of proof. The state has to meet that. And so that is kind of my question, I guess, to everybody else is, do you think that they've met that burden? Do you think that the state has met the burden of saying that, yes, that they proved that Lori agreed with one or more people to perpetrate this crime, that she engaged in conduct intended to promote or assist another person in committing the crime, and did that conduct result in something that they knew was a crime? So those are the questions. And then on the self-defense question, one, was the deadly force necessary to prevent the harm of another person? And two, was the use of harm or threatened harm no more than was necessary in the situation? And this was also a question that I had when I was reviewing. Oh, you guys are mentioning the lives from the bathroom. So the place that I was staying with Tom and Susan, they let me stay in the crash in their place. There was an extra bed, but it wasn't like there were dividing walls everywhere. And because I was doing lives, I didn't want everybody to have to sit there and listen to me. So I chose to go into the larger of the two bathrooms and sat in front of the bathtub to do my lives so that they could, go on with their evening, watch TV, watch sports or whatever, so that I wasn't disturbing them. So that's what everybody's talking about, lives from the bathroom. I wasn't, literally using the bathroom. So this idea of necessary force, was it no more than was necessary in the situation? When you go back and you listen to Alex talk about the situation while he's sitting there on the curb, at no time does he say that he fears for his life. At no time does he say that he felt like he was in danger. He never says, man, when he hit me on the head, I thought I was going to die. He never said that it was necessary for him to bring a gun to a bat fight. That's the way I'm going to characterize it. I just think it's ridiculous that even if Charles Vallow had a bat, and yes, Alex's life could potentially have been in danger if Charles was able to get in a good hit there, but I don't believe that Charles hit Alex with the bat. I believe that injury was caused after the fact. And also it says that self-defense is only necessary while the danger continues. And then once the danger is over, the self-defense action has to stop. And that's where the second shot comes into play. If the second shot hit Charles while he was lying on the ground, that's not self-defense. That means that the threat had already been eliminated. And I think that instruction was so important for that reason. And then also, self-defense is justified only when a reasonable person could assert that this type of action was reasonably necessary. And this is the problem that I have in all of this, is that a reasonable person in this situation, I don't think would have ever gone into the bedroom to get a gun. If you were Alex and you're the only one in the house, you leave. He could have gotten around Charles. He could have left out the back door. He could have gone out the patio door. He could have gotten around him and gone out the front door. He could have gone out the garage door, gotten into his truck and left. There was literally no reason for any of this to go on. So what we're focusing on now is the instruction, I think, of the conspiracy, because that's what they have to prove. So I thought it was interesting. Judge Boreski noted that the foreperson is the one who gets to set the schedule, the deliberation schedule, with the approval of the court. So if the foreperson decides that they want to deliberate until they're finished deliberating, if they want to go into the night, they can do that. If they want to reconvene at 8 a.m. in the morning, they can do that. So the jury foreperson is the one who gets to determine whether or not the jury deliberation schedule is going to follow the same schedule as the court. If I were the judge, I think that I would probably ask the jury to please deliberate for the rest of the court day. And then I would probably ask the jury to go ahead and convene earlier than the normal 10:30 time. Then ask them to, take the time to convene for the full extent of the day as much as they can. So I am seeing some movement in the courtroom. Always when you see heads go past the camera, that's usually the court staff going out to go get the jury. And so I think it's just going to be a couple minutes here before we start to see and hear what is happening in the courtroom. So I've got my volume all the way up here. And I'm sorry about the fact that the court feed is lower than my feed. There's nothing I can do about that, unfortunately. So it's just going to be what it is. Unfortunately, you're going to have to just turn it up. We are about to do closing arguments here. And we are on, I'm just putting it on 2x because some people are reporting that they've already started closing arguments. And I think it's just weird that Court TV is the one that is the pool camera, but they're the ones who are behind in the feed. So I'm just going to go and look quickly at Hidden True Crime. They usually are up to speed on everything. Okay, so here we go. They've got it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share this one. And we've got all rise for the jury. Thanks, C. Charles, so much for the super sticker. Okay, I'm going to mute myself. and we're going to listen to these closing arguments. And thank you guys for being here with me today. I appreciate it so much, not having to do this by myself.
All right, the jury is now present. Please be seated. This is time set for closing arguments. The state can proceed with its closing argument.
July 18th of 2019, just 7 days after this defendant and her co-conspirator Alex Cox shot and killed Charles. This defendant texted her soon-to-be next husband, Chad Daybell, about Charles's life insurance policy. Her words tell us that she was involved in this killing. Her actions and her words of texting Chad Daybell tell us the motives behind this murder: Chad and money. The morning of that 18th of July, Lori Vallow texted Chad and said, quote, "I just got the letter from the insurance company saying that I am not the beneficiary. It's a spear through my heart. Who do you think he changed it to?" Later that day, after she spoke with the life insurance company, she sent Chad another text. Quote, "So I talked to the insurance company. He changed it in March. Probably it was Ned before we got rid of him." Lori Vallow's words 7 days after Charles was shot and killed tells us that we was her and Alex killing Charles. Why? For that money. But Lori Vallow's plan to kill Charles wasn't just known by her lover, Chad Daybell, and her accomplice and co-conspirator, Alex Cox. It was also known by her brother, Adam. Adam told us that he knew about Lori's beliefs. He knew what she had been saying about Charles's concerns for himself. And he told us that he knew about this plan for an intervention to talk to a stakeholder. That morning of July 11th, when Charles arrived at Lori's house, as she knew he would, he texted Adam and said, "Al is here." Adam texted back, "They are planning something." He knew. And 3 days later, on Saturday, when Adam finally learned, when his friend Googled Charles, that he had been shot and killed by Alex, Adam told us he went back and talked to his mother, and he confronted her about this. And he told his mother, Lori and Alex conspired to kill Charles. He knew, and he was right. Lori's ex-friend, Christina Atwood, she told you about that very uncomfortable dinner on June 9th, a month before the murder, where Alex Cox was talking about just wanting to kill Charles. He said this multiple times, and this defendant didn't care. In fact, she talked about how she had been drugging Charles. Christina told you she was so disturbed by this, she actually went and saw Lori the next day, June 10th, and told her, if something happens to Charles, I'm going to have to go to the police. Christina knew. She was right. And Nancy Jo Hancock, now she had just met Charles a few days before, and they had talked and texted and had been on the phone for hours, you heard. Charles had told her all about Lori, the things she was saying, the things she was doing. She told you that she knew that Charles was concerned for his own safety. And she understood the motive. She told Charles the night before, you probably should just tell Lori that you've changed the beneficiary, that she's no longer going to get that money. Nancy Jo knew, and she was right. Lori Vallow wanted the $1 million, and she wanted Chad Daybell. And she and Alex used that twisted religious beliefs they had so that they could kill the evil, possessed Charles and be like Nephi. The evidence that has been presented in this trial will prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that this defendant is guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. So I want to split up my closing into 3 sections. First, I'm going to talk to you about the timeline and the motives in this case and the evidence that supports those. Second, I want to talk to you about the jury instructions and the evidence that's been presented to you in court. I'll remind you that anything the defendant said in her opening was not presented at trial through a witness or through an exhibit, and it is not evidence. Using the evidence that has been presented and admitted at trial, the state will show you how, again, the defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of this crime. And finally, I'm going to talk to you about those justification defenses, the excuses and the reasons why the defendant would like you to believe that they had a valid basis for shooting and killing Charles on July 11th. And we'll talk about how, in fact, there is no justification for what they happened. What happened that morning was a first-degree premeditated execution of Charles Vallow. So let's go through the evidence. The timeline really starts, and we know it goes back much further than this, but the big change occurs on June 29th or 30th, when you learned that Charles Vallow learned about these KK Walker emails. He learned about that affair with Chad. Now he knows Lori is cheating on him. We know that he contacted Chad Daybell about it. He contacted Chad's wife about this. He told Adam about it, and he told the defendant about it. So everyone knew that Charles now knew this. July 9th is now the first time that Charles is going to be coming back to Arizona. We know from the time he learned about that affair, he hadn't been back until this planned visit to see his son, JJ. We know at 1:13 p.m., Charles texts Adam and books him a flight for the next day. At 1:21, we know that Adam is contacting Alex. And they talk for 20 minutes. And Alex lets Adam know, sure, you can stay with me. Of course, Alex doesn't know the plan yet, the mission. Lori then starts talking to Chad Daybell. We know that she knows about this intervention. She knows about Adam coming. And we know this because, again, of her text messages. We see Lori then starting to round up the troops. Why does she do this? Because she wants to ensure that on July 11th, it is Charles and only Charles coming to the house and not the intervention of Adam or Brandon or Zach coming over to help him. So she has Melanie. Tells her she can't go to this wedding. She has to stay here. It's coming to a head. This week will change everything. Call me. Then we have July 9th, the text messages with Alex. She tells him, so the plot thickens, call me when you can. He doesn't call her initially. So she sends him another message, this one really letting him know. She specifically tells him, I'm going to need you to stay close to me the next couple days. Mel too, she can't go to Utah. She's got a job. They are planning some kind of intervention, but want Mel out of the way, so I'm left alone. She talks, I need to come get the stuff at your house tomorrow and secure it. Lots to do. Thank you for standing by me. It's all coming to a head this week. I will be like Nephi, I am told, and so will you. And then what happens? This gets Alex to call, and they talk for almost an hour. An hour planning how they're going to stop the intervention, how they're going to be like Nephi. As we get to the 10th of July, and we continue through this timeline, we see Lori again talking religiously with Chad, 149 minutes that morning. She's also texting Melanie Boudreau, Melanie B, telling her that it's important for the mission, for Melanie to help her by keeping Brandon distracted. We saw those messages where Melanie says she'll pretend to be sick. We know that on the 10th, Adam arrives in Phoenix. And now we have Summer helping the defendant, letting her know what is going on with Adam and Zach. Everyone is covered to ensure that Charles will be alone on the 11th. We have the continuing talks with Chad, her soon-to-be husband. As we get into the 10th in the afternoon, we know that per their agreement, Adam calls his brother Alex. Hey, I'm here. Brother doesn't answer. He sends him a text. I'm here. No response. Why? Because the night before, his sister Lori told him, we have a mission. We must be like Nephi. Charles is coming into town. You must stay at my house the night of the 10th so you can be here the morning of the 11th. We also know that Summer gave Lori an out. Hey, you can stay at my house. No one will know where you are. We're going to be out of town. You can hang out here. Lori doesn't take her up on that. She has a mission to do. As the night grows on the 10th, Adam continues to try to reach his brother Alex. Again, no response. And by 45 or so minutes after that last text by Adam, we know Alex is already at Lori's house. He's there with his gun and a garbage bag of some underwear. Why? That gun is important. A loaded weapon, 2 extra magazines of ammunition with him. He is ready for his mission. And again, Summer is updating her, telling Lori that Zach and Adam are still at her house. They're going to go stay at Mimi's. And she even tells him that Adam is still waiting for Alex to get back to him. Still, he doesn't understand. Why isn't my brother responding to me? I was supposed to stay there. And again, what does Adam bring over? Gun and a garbage bag of clothes. That's all he needs to be part of the mission. When we get to July 11th, we still have Lori talking with Chad. We see those text messages going back between them. And then we start learning from the GPS from Charles Vallow's phone as he arrives. 7:35 a.m., he arrives at 5531 South Four Peaks. That's where we have at 7:36, Adam texting Charles. They are planning something. There's no reason why Alex should be there. And that explains why Alex wasn't responding to me and didn't let me stay there. We see that last outgoing text message by Charles Vallow at 7:37. And in fact, what we see is at 7:37 and 12 seconds, Charles sends out his last outgoing message. And at 7:37 and 29 seconds, there's an incoming message from Adam. It's not read until 12:13 p.m. What becomes important here is in this timeline, how long is Charles at the residence here? You hear in her interview how she says it's so fast. Charles comes inside. He's angry. He's jerky. And she tells him, take JJ. Go get him Burger King. They get JJ out to the car. And then she holds onto the phone. And this argument erupts, and it's just so fast. But what we know is it's actually 12 minutes long. This is not a fast incident. In this 12 minutes, Lori Vallow and her brother Alex Cox are doing their mission, and they are being like Nephi. We know at 7:49, it's over. Lori has left in Charles Vallow's car with his phone and JJ and Tylee. We know that there are 2 phone calls between Alex and this defendant after she leaves. As Charles is laying, dying or dead on the floor, 7:52, 8:06, they talk. 47 minutes passes before Alex calls 911. 47 minutes to stage the scene. The police are advised when they arrive that the shooting just occurred and that CPR was given. Why is that important? Because you heard even during the interviews, the police were trying to figure out this timeline. Didn't make sense. At 8:48, almost an hour later, Lori Vallow returns. And then we see that around 9:40, she is being interviewed at the Family Advocacy Center. We know that Lori Vallow has Charles's phone that entire afternoon. You saw the PowerPoint from Detective Werther showing that her phone by about 12:36 is already her phone, Alex's phone, and Charles's phone are all in the area of Alex's house out in Sandham. You see on her records that she again calls Chad Daybell. We see that Detective Enclan calls her and leaves her a message. They don't leave immediately because what do we know? We know at 2:13, Alex is taking photos of Adam's flight reservations from Charles's phone. Not screenshots, but photos of the phone. At 2:18, Lori Vallow, who has not told Charles's kids, his family, about his murder, is calling the mortuary. A little bit after that, they still haven't left. She's calling Chad again. And then by 3:11, we know that Charles's phone, through the GPS data, is back at 5531 South Four Peaks. And when asked about it, the defendant and Tylee hand it over and provide the PIN. They have no problem on how to get into it. They've already looked through it. They don't need it anymore. That evening, Lori and Chad are talking all night. You can look through the exhibits and see the multiple calls of them discussing. These aren't calls to Charles's family. They're not calls to his kids. They're talking with her lover, her soon-to-be husband, Chad Daybell. So let's talk about the motives of this case. Money. We see that from the text messages and the anger that you see through them when she learns that that's been changed and she's not going to get it. Chad Daybell. We didn't go through those text messages, but you can look at them. They are already very romantically involved by the time that Charles is murdered. And it's clear that Chad knows exactly what's going on because he's asking her about the car, about the insurance. All of those things Chad knows. And then there's that religious belief system. The zombies, the Z's, the possessed evil spirits. And her being like Nephi. All a reason and a way to kill someone, just like Nephi, a justified killing. There's that first call when we talk about money motive. To Banner Life Insurance.
And what was the cause of his passing? Well, he was shot. Okay, so I don't know how I want to put that. Okay, all right. And I hate to ask, but is it? Yeah, you can just say yes or no. Was it a homicide? No, it was an accident. An accident.
So what we hear here is Lori Vallow being untruthful to Banner Life Insurance. We'll talk about credibility later, but it becomes very relevant that even in the smallest of things, this defendant exaggerates, minimizes, and is completely untruthful to various people. We all know that she was not the beneficiary. She didn't. But we also know that Charles Vallow was not accidentally shot. She told the police she was there. She knows that her brother intentionally shot him. Of course, they want to claim it's self-defense. There's no accident about that when you shoot someone twice. Motives for money. What we see again here is Lori Vallow talking to Chad about the motive. Telling Chad about the fact that it was changed. I just got the letter from that insurance company saying I am not the beneficiary. It is a spear through my heart. Who do you think he changed it to? Brandon? Or probably Kay? He left nothing for JJ. What do we know? Again, we see that Chad knows about all of these things. And what does he talk about in that morning as you have those entire messages? Exhibit 230. It would be interesting if he got changed after he had 2 bullets to the chest. Again, as we talk about the murder, we have later in that day the message that I talked to you about. So it was probably Ned before we got rid of him. We, not I, not my brother Alex, but we did. And then the other thing in this text message that is of importance is the fact that Lori Vallow knew a month before she went to Social Security how much money she was already going to get for the death of Charles. Here she says, I will still get the $4,000 a month from Social Security. When we talk about that motive and the anger by this defendant over not being the beneficiary, we know that even on July 28th, so 10 days later, she goes into Charles's computer to find the change of beneficiary form. She texts that to Chad to show him, and she sends it to Kay and confronts her about it. Money. That's what she wanted. And Chad. So let's talk about Chad. The affair with Chad Daybell. We know that she knew him as far back as November of 2018 when she came here, when he came to Arizona and stayed at Lori's house. You were told by Detective Duncan that there were recordings on her Lori for Style iCloud account of Chad Daybell here in Arizona for that Preparing the People conference. You also heard that in the Lolly Time, the later account that was created later, that in March of 2019, there were screenshots of flights to Idaho and back to Arizona with both Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. This is during that time when she disappeared and Charles was taking care of JJ, and she's off flying to Hawaii and Idaho living the good life with her soon-to-be husband. And then, of course, we know that come November 5th, she actually marries Chad Daybell. That KK Walker email address, this was that June 29th. Big change. What do we know? That on April 21st, she created that account. She used her own phone number in creating it. And then she sent messages to Chad Daybell, brother Daybell. You have that exhibit. She pretends to be Karen Walker and invites him to Houston, because that's where she is at that time. She offers to use Charles's money to fly him out there and that he can stay at the house with her and her husband. In June of 2019, we see that Lori again uses that same account, but this time she pretends to be Charles and invites Chad out to Arizona to help him with a book. And again, in Exhibit 289, you have those letters. Charles finds those. And he lets everyone know he did. And he confronts Tammy, lets her know. Confronts Chad, lets him know. And he certainly lets the defendant know that he knows. And now the jig is up. We see in these text messages that were recovered from the iCloud accounts, whether they're under the Bubby context or under the Melanie 2 contact, this relationship between Lori and Chad. If you want to read the story, it kind of mimics them meeting in November, hooking up in hotels, and discussing their love for each other. When we are talking about a motive and a person who wants money and who has not worked for 13 years, who has had her husband pay for her homes, her phones, her cars, allowing her to go to the temple and work out and go to lunch and restaurants. This is a big change in life if she loses all of this. But if she gets $1 million, it's not so big of a difference, along with that Social Security she'll be getting. And then obviously we know that once Charles was out of the way, Lori and Chad were able to get married. But what about those religious beliefs? Everyone that Lori knew, who she expressed them to, told you that they were not in line with the Church of Latter-day Saints. Everyone told you that she said things like she didn't need to repent, she didn't need forgiveness, she could do whatever she wanted now, that she was in a celestial state, translated, that she is spiritually and physically changing, that she's above the priesthood, that she knew who was dark and evil. You saw those text messages, both about Charles and heard from people, as well as about Brandon and Zach and Adam. People who were helping Charles were also dark or Z's. And ultimately, what did we learn? That she associated herself with Nephi, a prophet, a holy man, who was justified and asked by God to kill Laban because he was an evil, wicked king who had the tablets that God wanted him to go get. Lori was just like that. She was justified in her killing. We heard from her brother, Adam, that their relationship had ended when she told him some things about her beliefs that he disagreed with, that she was turning into that celestial state, that she didn't need to eat, that she had more authority than the priesthood.
Yes.
You yourself personally, were you aware of Lori having outside? Lori having any beliefs that were outside of what is accepted by the LDS religion?
Yes.
Can you tell us what you were aware of that you knew to be outside the LDS religion?
Lori told me that she was in the process of translating from a mortal human being to an immortal human being, a celestial state.
That's something that the LDS religion supports?
I haven't heard of it and that it's happened here on Earth yet.
Serena Sharp told us about, again, the not repenting and Lori changing physically and spiritually.
Members of the LDS Church.
Yes.
During this time, did Lori ever tell you things about her beliefs that seemed to go against what you understood or what you were taught through the LDS Church?
Yes.
Did Lori ever tell you that she did not need to repent?
Yes, she did.
During this weekend, did Lori talk to you about her husband, Charles Vallow, being possessed?
Yes, she did.
What do you recall about her talking about her husband being possessed?
I recall that she spoke about her husband being possessed by an evil spirit, and she named the evil spirit.
Do you recall what the name was?
Yes.
What was it?
It was Ned.
N-E-D? Ned?
N-E-D.
Now, Serena Sharp was someone who met Lori in November, texted or talked with her for a while, and then was invited to that girls' weekend. One of the jury instructions you're looking at, and we'll talk about more though, is the credibility of a witness. Serena Sharp has no dog in this fight. She knew Lori for a little while. She was invited to, I'll call it the inner circle. The defendant told her some things that went against her religious beliefs. And she said pretty much after that, the defendant stopped talking to her. Now, how do we know she's being truthful? Well, we see Ned in lots of text messages. This just helps tell us that this is something Lori was telling lots of people, that her husband is possessed by this evil spirit, Ned. And we learn later that, like Nephi, she can get rid of him.
Do you recall Lori Vallow telling you that her husband Charles was no longer Charles, that he was now this possessed person?
Yes.
When Lori was talking to you about Ned, was she explaining that this evil spirit was now in the body of her husband?
I don't know if she used those exact terms, but that was the impression I got, yes.
So the word she used expressed to you that idea that this evil spirit Ned was now in her husband's body.
Yes.
The other thing that Serena Sharp told us was Lori using that term zombie. You remember how upset the defendant got by her saying that. But again, why would Serena make up any of this? She has no reason to. What she recalls is that that is a term that this defendant used when speaking of people like her husband who were possessed by these evil spirits. We heard from Christina Atwood as well, the same concept that Lori Vallow repeatedly would say.
Did she tell you, as well as the other women who were at this meeting in February, that her husband was possessed?
Yes.
So it wasn't just you in a private conversation.
Correct.
She was open about it.
Yes.
again, we see this ongoing timing of Lori Vallow talking of her evil, dark husband, who she later is authorized under her religion to get rid of. We know as well from Christina Atwood that there is a progression of these beliefs becoming more deviated from the LDS religion as she is meeting with her between February and June when she finally hears those words. From the time you started meeting with these gatherings in February through to June, did you start to see sort of a progression of things that Lori was telling you that seemed outside of your faith?
Yes.
Did she make statements to you that you believed went against your religion?
Yes.
Did she at any point tell you that she did not need to repent anymore?
Yes.
What is that? What is that meaningful to you in your religion?
We believe that every single person outside of Jesus Christ has reason to repent.
Other than Lori Vallow, according to her words to multiple people. So let's take all of this, the motives and this timeline now, and talk about some of the jury instructions and all the evidence that supports proof beyond a reasonable doubt that this defendant is guilty. I want to start with talking to you about direct and circumstantial evidence. You have a jury instruction that tells you that evidence may be direct or circumstantial, that direct evidence is the testimony of what a witness saw, heard, or otherwise sensed, and circumstantial evidence is proof of a fact or facts from which you may find another fact. You're told the law makes no distinction between direct and circumstantial evidence. And this is relevant. The witnesses have often been questioned. Did you see, hear, or do that? What you are told is you can actually use circumstantial evidence to convict anyone. But let me give you an example of this. Imagine you are sitting on a beach. Just you, it's quiet. Off to your right, there's some rocks and you can't see around that. While you're sitting there, a person walks by, you watch them walk by and they go around the rocks and you can't see them anymore. And then someone runs up 5 minutes later and they say, hey, did you see someone come by here? You say, well, yeah, I saw them walk that way. That is direct evidence. You saw it. Now imagine you're on that same beach and it's completely empty. You close your eyes for 5 minutes. Just relax. Before you closed your eyes, the beach was completely pristine. And when you open them up, now you see footprints. You can see the toes facing off to your right, the heels, and you see them go all the way around the rocks there. Somebody again runs up 5 minutes later and they say, hey, did someone come by here? And you go, well, I mean, I didn't see them, but they must have gone by in the last 5 minutes because you can see their footprints. They went that way. That is circumstantial evidence. You can infer from that that someone went by and where they went. The burden of proof. The state has the burden of proof, as we absolutely should. So let's talk a little bit about what it is and what it is not. You're told that the burden of proof is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And the instruction tells you that that leaves you firmly convinced in the defendant's guilt. You're told there are very few things in this world that we know with absolute certainty. And in criminal cases, the law does not require proof that overcomes every doubt. If, based on your consideration of the evidence, you are firmly convinced that the defendant is guilty of the crime charged, you must find him or her guilty. So I want to start by saying what proof beyond a reasonable doubt is not. It is not proof beyond all doubt. It is not proof beyond all conceivable doubt. It's not proof beyond all possible doubt, and it's not no doubt. You're told that there are very few things in life we know with absolute certainty. So just because someone says, what if? That is not a reasonable doubt. What you're told is it's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. As we go through the evidence and apply it to the crimes, we will show you that there is no reasonable doubt as to this defendant's guilt. So let's start with the crime itself. Conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. There are 3 stages in this, or 3 things the state must prove. 1, that the defendant or her co-conspirator caused the death of another person. Well, we know that Alex Cox shot and killed Charles on July 11th of 2019. Alex called 911. Alex indicated he was the shooter. He was the only one home. It was his gun. His credit card or debit card was in there with the gun. And we know that Lori told the police that her brother killed Charles. So we know that he caused the death of, so that. 2, that they intended or knew that she or a co-conspirator would cause the death of another person. When we are looking at this case, we are looking at the defendant's words, actions, and motive. The words and actions of having her brother Alex come over on the 10th with a gun so that he would be there when Charles came over to pick up JJ. The actions that day of taking Charles's phone, ensuring that he could not leave, that he could not take his son to school. The defendant told the detectives how angry and screaming Charles was about the phone, but she didn't just give it to him, throw it at him, tell him to get out, whatever you might do. She held on to it and told the police that she walked away with it as he's trying to grab it. The defendant's actions and words show us that she is the only reason why Charles stayed in there and the only reason why Charles was shot. Then there's those 12 minutes. Defendant tried to pretend that this was a quick, angry scuffle. But Charles is there for 12 minutes. The defendant is there for 12 minutes. Alex is there for 12 minutes before she leaves. We look at her actions when she came back. She told the police her brother was hit in the head with a bat. She never asks how he is. She's not concerned about his injury. She's not concerned about her husband being dead on the floor of her house, her child now without a father. The lack of words that she said there and her demeanor show again that she was well aware of what was going on and part of this incident. We look at her words to Chad, that Charles changed his life insurance policy before we got rid of him. They show her intent to kill Charles. And again, we look at the motive, money and Chad. When did this happen? The first time Charles came back into town after he found out about the affair. Finally, the state has to prove that the defendant or the co-conspirator acted with premeditation. So I'm going to talk to you about premeditation. You have a jury instruction for it, and it tells you that the defendant or the co-conspirator intended to kill another human being or knew she or the co-conspirator would kill another human being, and that after forming that intent or knowledge, reflected on the decision before killing. It is this reflection, regardless of the length of time in which it occurs, that distinguishes first-degree murder from second-degree murder. You're also told an act is not done with premeditation if it is the instant effect of a sudden quarrel or heat of passion. It's where you remember those 12 minutes and the calmness of her walking around with that phone and her demeanor. You're told the time needed for reflection is not necessarily prolonged, and the space of time between the intent or knowledge to kill and the act of killing may be very short. So I'm going to give you an example. It's a lot of legalese, and then we'll talk about what we really have here. So imagine again, you are driving your car. You do every day. You're coming up to an intersection and you see the light turn yellow. And in that second you think, do I want to run it? Or do I want to slam on my brakes and hit it? Stop before I go into the intersection. You think about that and then you decide, I'm going to slam on my brakes and I'm going to stop. That is the time it takes to reflect. That is the time it takes for premeditation. But we have a lot more than this because we have planning, not just premeditation that morning. So when we talk about the premeditation that we see, it starts at least back in June, when we have Christina telling us about Alex Cox saying that he wanted to kill Charles, Lori having no reaction to that, and instead talking about drugging Charles. Did you hear Alex making some comments?
Yes.
And you told us that they made you uncomfortable. What were these comments?
He stated he wished that he could just kill Charles.
Okay. Was Lori around when he was saying this?
Yes, one of the times.
Okay. So he said it more than once.
Yes.
Can you describe for us sort of his demeanor when he's saying this about wanting to just kill Charles?
It was jocular, just as I recall, he was standing up and just talking about it pretty loudly.
And you said one of the times that he said this, it was around Lori.
Yes.
Did she react in any way to hearing her brother say that he wished he could just kill her husband?
Not that I recall.
By July 9th, or when we start having this planning that we're talking about, we know that Lori Vallow is living in a house paid for by Charles Vallow. We know from even her statements to Detective Enclan that she doesn't like Charles, is what she says, but Charles won't file for a divorce. We know from her words and text messages that she wants to be with Chad Daybell, but Charles is her cash cow. She hasn't worked. She pays rent, car, cell phones, her travel. And so as far back as June 9th, we're already hearing that Alex and Lori would like to not just get rid of Charles, but kill him. But if you think that June 9th wasn't the beginning of this planning, this idea, this concept that Lori and her brother have of getting rid of Charles, this evil, dark, possessed person, then we know on the 9th that there is definitely a plan by this defendant. And we see that through those text messages with Melanie, with Summer, with Alex, where she speaks of the mission, where she talks about telling Melanie, you can't leave. You got to pretend to be sick and stay here and keep track of Brandon so he doesn't come help Charles. He can't be in the picture. We need to stay here to defend ourselves from an intervention. The 10th. Again, we have Melanie who is talking to her and saying, that she wants to just go to this wedding. And what does Lori tell her? No, you have to stay here for the mission. The mission of stopping an intervention? No. As we continue through the 9th, we see Lori getting everyone lined up to help her. Alex, where he again is told that he will be like Nephi, just like her. Now, Lori tells him it's an intervention. Everyone knows, Adam told you what's an intervention? It's talking to someone. It's common language. But that's not what the defendant wants to happen. She doesn't want Charles to divorce her and lose his money. She doesn't want this intervention to happen where she loses her temple recommend. What she wants is to be like Nephi and get rid of her husband.
Well, Nephi was a prophet in the Book of Mormon. It's the first chapter. He was a prophet, very humble and faithful servant of the Lord. Ironically enough, his brothers tried to kill him at one point. But he actually ended up going to Jerusalem to get these plates back, and he was run off, came back, and then went back again because the Lord asked him to. And when he did, the King Laban, who was actually a wicked king, was laying on the ground drunk in front of him, and Nephi was told to kill Laban.
Who was he told by?
The spirit, or God.
So God was using a Holy Spirit to tell him to kill Laban, and
Yes.
did he?
Yes, he did.
Is that something he anguished over?
Yes.
But ultimately, it was a justified killing.
Yes.
You heard from Detective Duncan that everyone he spoke with gave this same story. And again, the defendant questioned others about this story. But what we've heard is from Detective Duncan and from Adam that Nephi is this justified killing. When we think about her religious beliefs and what she's been telling people about not needing to repent, about telling people who is dark and evil, a zombie or a Z, that she is above the priesthood, it makes sense that she feels justified in determining who should live or die, just as she told her brother on the 9th. And we know that in fact we're talking about a justified killing because Alex brought a gun over. He didn't bring the Book of Mormon to talk to Charles about something. He didn't bring a friend to try to record Charles saying something. He brought a gun with him. And then he waited there for his sister's husband to come into the house so he could kill him. What we see is a very planned out, premeditated murder. But let's talk about some additional premeditation. Again, as we're looking at Summer, we see on the 10th that Lori is having her sister update her on where Adam and Zach are staying, so she knows they're not with Charles. They're not coming over. They're not going to be interfering with their justified killing. And there's that 12-minute time where the defendant desperately wanted to rewrite the timeline as they told the police that day. This just happened. It was very quick, but it wasn't. It was 12 minutes. Charles arrives at 7:37 and Lori leaves at 7:49. During this time is when that plan, that premeditated murder occurred. So let's talk about that as well. The evidence at the scene, the physical evidence, supports this premeditated murder. Alex fired 2 shots. One of them went through Charles' center mast, exited out his back, and went into the floorboard. The second one, Charles was on the floor, on his back, bleeding out, still able to move, and we know that because he had blood on his left hand, and he was executed as he lay there on the ground. In that time, when we talk about premeditation and reflection, as Adam had to move his hand down, reposition the gun, and discharge and pull the trigger one more time, that is premeditated first-degree murder, no matter what you believe before that. Again, when we talk about that physical evidence, we saw the fact that the location of that bullet defect in the ground matched right under Charles's left shoulder. And we heard from Dr. Baumgartner. Dr. Baumgartner told you that this was a classic shored wound. And no matter how many questions could be asked about him of maybe a bamboo shirt might stop a bullet in one location but not in another, or how many matrix-like hypotheticals where maybe Charles bounced back up and then on his way down, the bullet slowed down through him and waited till he hit the ground again before it exited. Dr. Baumgartner told you, no, those hypotheticals, those issues did not make sense. He's never seen a t-shirt stop a bullet in one location or at all. And we know Charles didn't bounce because we know he had no injuries to the back of his head. This also tells us a little bit about the shooting itself. When Charles was shot that first time through center mast, he did not fall straight back and land onto the ground, laying there on his back. If he had, he would have had bruising, abrasions on the back of his head when he hit the ground. He didn't have anything on the back of his head. Where did he have abrasions? On his knees. When he fell to the ground after being shot, do we know how long it took him to roll over, to fall onto his back before he was then shot a second time because he's still alive? You heard it could take up to 2 minutes for Charles to have died, and then he could have spoke and moved during that time period. What we do know is that he eventually ended up on his back. And while he was on his back is when he was shot the second time by Alex. This defendant and her brother in that house waiting and making sure that Charles was dead, murdered, executed. Words, actions, motive, and physical evidence all tell you what happened that morning. So let's talk about conspiracy. And I know there are a lot of layers here, and I'm just building them up for you. You're told in your jury instructions that conspiracy requires proof. 1, the defendant agreed with one or more persons that one of them or another would engage in certain conduct. So again, we look to Lori Vallow's words. What she had been talking about for months, Charles being possessed, being dark, wanting to kill him, the discussion on June 9th, poisoning him or drugging him previously. And then when we got to July 9th, it is all coming to a head. We will be like Nephi. Her actions, having Charles come to the house, instead of him staying there, she had him stay away. Why? Because if Charles stayed at the house, couldn't have Alex come over with a gun and be ready to shoot him, right? You got to have him come in. Her actions of inviting her brother over with a gun the night before so he would be there. She knew when he would show up. He texted her, I'll be there at 7:30. Pick up JJ. But most importantly, why did Charles stay in the house? Lori told the detective that Charles initially was like, oh, I'll just stay here for 20 minutes and then I'll take JJ to school. Well, she wasn't going to kill him in front of JJ. No, take JJ to Burger King. Get him out of the house. Go put him in the car. And he does that. But then she takes his phone. And she won't give it back. What she told the detective was, before this alleged Tylee bat, whatever thing you want to talk about there, that she had Charles's phone and was asking him about texting Adam. Of course, that's interesting because how would she have known that? We know she had the phone actually for a while before she did that interview. She tells the detective numerous times that Charles is telling her to give him back his phone, and she will not. That she's walking around. He's trying to get the phone. She won't give it to him. Why? Because she needs Alex to come out. You brought that gun over for a reason. So she agreed with one or more persons, her brother, Alex, that she intended to promote or assist the commission of such conduct. Well, of course, we know both the promote. She is the one who on the 9th said, we will be like Nephi. It's time to stop this whole thing. Charles trying to take my temple recommend, all this stuff that's going on. Time to kill him. And of course, she assists by ensuring that Charles stays in the house when she takes that phone. And of course, they knew that it would constitute first-degree murder. That's what Nephi did. Only unlike Nephi, where it was justified. Here, ladies and gentlemen, this murder was not justified. Finally, think about the demeanor when you're thinking about, again, words, actions, motive, and demeanor. When Lori comes back to the house, she is very, what did we hear that word many times? Nonchalant, calm, no questions about her brother, no questions about her husband, no questions about the house, just laughing about her neighbors. She is in absolute agreement with what has happened. She knows what's happened and she's calm and good with it because she doesn't need to repent. She is able to determine who should live and die, and she has done that. So when we talk of the scope of conspiracy, you're told that to prove a conspiracy, it is not necessary to show a formal meeting or express agreement. But we see that from the 9th in that conversation that she and Alex had, where she tells him, you are going to have to stay near me for the next couple days, and we will be like Nephi. You're also told that a conspiracy may be inferred from circumstances showing a common criminal objective. So, because you don't have someone who says, I heard them say, we shall conspire. You can infer that from the conduct of what happened on the 9th, the conduct of what happened on the 10th, and the conduct of what happened on the 11th. All infer to you a conspiracy of Alex coming over with his gun to shoot and kill Charles. As we again look at this in this conspiracy, again, we're looking at the same words and actions. March, Charles is no longer there. There's just an evil spirit in his body. June, Charles is still possessed, and now Alex is saying he wants to kill him. Lori is fine with this, and she says she's drugging him or had been drugging him. And then 2 weeks before, all of a sudden, Charles knows Lori's been having this affair. Lori's words, actions, motive, and the physical evidence. Conspiracy again, we see that Lori and Alex know exactly when Charles is showing up. Alex doesn't go to the door according to Lori and confront Charles or tell him we'll send JJ out and you can leave with him. The world is so difficult. How hard would that be? Bring JJ right to the door and let him leave with his dad. No, you aren't going to shoot him outside. You want to make it look like self-defense inside. As you go through this and we think about what's going on, the defendant doesn't even care. She wants her husband killed so bad that she's willing to let her brother bring over a loaded gun in an unlocked gun case in a house with a 7-year-old autistic child. That's fine. When the defendant was questioning Detective Enclan, she was talking about how hot it was outside. JJ's out in the car. But she has no problem with an unlocked gun in the house with the kid, and she's worried about her child out in the car. She's not. We know that because she's the reason Charles doesn't go back out into the car and leave. She keeps him there in the house. She is why JJ's out in the car alone. She has to keep him there until Alex comes out and can shoot and kill him. When we talk about that premeditation, obviously we're talking about that message. We know from the 9th on, they are premeditated, they are conspiring, and it's all heading to July 11th. We look at the timing of this, and this is actions and non-actions. Charles is in the house for 12 minutes. After those 12 minutes, they wait 47 more minutes before they call 911. Why? To stage the scene. No CPR is performed. They wait for Charles to be dead, and then they talk during this time period. They talk. They could call 911, but nope, they're going to just talk. So again, you're looking at their actions, what happened and didn't happen, and the motives. There's the gun that was used to kill Charles. We're going to go through a couple of these exhibits, some of what Lori said, and it's exhibits 192 and 197, where she again says that Charles came over and said he was just going to hang out at the house for like 20 minutes, take JJ to school. She, of course, tells him to go. And when JJ is out in the car, she has Charles's phone, and she won't give it back. And no matter how much she says that Charles is screaming at her to give the phone back, she won't. And all of this conversation about Charles demanding the phone back is prior to her statement to Detective Enclan that Tylee comes out with this fact. This is all her doing. This is her as an accomplice assisting and promoting this murder. Lori is setting up Charles so Alex can shoot him.
And with JJ? And so he put them in the car, in the driveway, and then he came back in, right? So I kissed JJ goodbye. He came back in, and his phone was on the counter, and I had his phone. And he was like, give me my phone. And I was like, why don't you show me your text that you've been texting, blah, 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 you know, whatever. Because he's like acting really weird, like he's plotting something against me. Like, I'm like, why are you even here? Like, what did you come here for? You know, he's been talking to my other brother, and my brother came into town at the same time last night. and I haven't talked to my brother in a while, my other brother, and I was like, and so he was texting him on the phone when he first got to my house, and I'm like, why are you texting Adam? Like, do you even talk to him? Like my other brothers.
So when you listen to these interview of Lori Vallow, you have to put into context, this is 9:52 in the morning when this part of this interview is occurring. And she's telling the detective that she confronts Charles about texting her brother Adam. Now, she's had the 47 minutes she's been driving around, and then that time at the house when she's waiting outside to learn all of those texts and what's been going on between her brother and Adam and Charles. And so she is now mixing this in to her interview. And so when you're listening to her interview, we know she's trying to work out this, what happened? How did this go? You can watch her demeanor as well. And as you're going through this, see how she's just telling a story here, like what happened, almost chuckling about it.
Okay. So this morning he comes back in and
He comes back in, I wouldn't give him his phone, he was screaming at me to give him his phone. He was very worried about whatever was on his text that he did not want me to see. And so I was just holding it there and he was screaming at me. And I was kind of walking towards around the house with it so he couldn't get it. He's like reaching for it and stuff like that.
Again, JJ's in the car, Tylee's not out, Alex isn't out, and she is making sure that he doesn't leave. She's walking around the house, holding his phone, refusing to give it to him, making sure her autistic child is sitting out in the car even longer so that she can ensure that exactly what they've been planning happens, that Alex has time to come out with the gun that he brought over and shoot and kill Charles. This defendant is the only reason why Charles didn't leave with JJ. This defendant is the one who provoked Charles by taking his phone and refusing to get it back. This defendant is the one who ensured that Charles was inside without JJ so Alex could shoot him. And this defendant is the person who set up Charles so that her brother Alex could shoot him. Let's talk about staging the scene. We know obviously from the first responders that when they arrived, no CPR was given. You heard from Officer Wierzbecki that when he felt Charles's neck, he thought he was dead already, but they still let the first responders in because they've been told CPR had been given. And what do we know? That they arrived within a few minutes. No one had ever tried to save Charles. No blood had been pushed out of him from CPR, whether strong or light. He had been dead for quite a while. His skin was mottled when they started cutting open his shirt and looking to the back, and lividity, the blood pooling, was occurring already. So they kind of knew something was off with that timeline. So what about the scene itself? The bat. It is placed to the right of Charles to look like he was using it. Got shot and it went flying behind him. Well, obviously we've heard from Kay, Charles's sister, that he was left-handed. We know from the blood evidence on his hand, he was left-handed. There's no damage to that mirror. There's no damage to the drywall. There's no damage anywhere, like this bat is being swung around in this horrific fight that's going on of grappling. The injury to Alex Cox's head. You heard it was a small 1-inch cut that he was using a paper towel to pat, and at times, as you watch that Exhibit 1, rubbing it, making sure it stays bleeding. There is no blood at the scene from this giant grappling thing going on that Lori Vallow wanted them to believe. His head is bleeding and they're grappling around and he's being beat with this bat, and yet not one drop of blood on the floor. Not one drop of blood going down the hallway when he put that gun away. Not one drop of blood on the gun itself. And then the shoes, left by the door to look like Lori Vallow had run out in fear after this horrific incident that they planned. But what we know from the Walgreens video is that she did enter the store with shoes, something on her feet. So we're going to go through. We know Charles again, left-handed.
Field with your brother.
Yeah,
What position did your brother play?
he was a pitcher. He was very, very good. He was a left-handed pitcher, and they're very hard to hit against.
Okay. Did he bat right or left-handed?
He was left-handed.
Did he do everything left-handed?
Yes.
Left-handed? So we know that Charles batted left-handed, not right-handed. And what we know is Lori Vallow had a story about how Charles was using that bat. And it becomes very important as well when we're talking about the staging of the scene. This is Exhibit 193.
Yeah, she was outside, and
What happened?
then they got up from that, and my brother had like stepped back, I guess, and then Charles was coming with me to that and yelling at me to give him his phone still, because I had it in my hand. It was all really quickly, and then when I went around kind of in the circle, then my brother was there.
When you said when you were going around and he was coming at you with the bat, how was he holding the bat?
Just like that, like backwards. One arm.
Like he was swinging, but like swinging it backwards? He would have done like
He would have swung it backwards at me, not frontward.
okay.
So Lori Vallow detected and planned that Charles is swinging the bat backwards. Now, if the bat was like this when he was shot, the arm would have been shot. Covers his center mass. So we know he wasn't here. So if he's out here, where would the bat go? Down, out, somewhere that way to his left. It would not end up thrown up above him. And if it wasn't there again, Charles would have been shot through the arm. Obviously, Alex forgot that Charles was left-handed. So when he placed that, like he was coming at him with a bat, their stories didn't quite match up with the evidence. So if we rely on Lori's story of how Charles was holding the bat, then there's zero way that that bat would end up where it ended up. And again, we know he's left-handed from not only Kay, but his own admissions of that blood on his hand. So we see the scene is staged, this bat that is so necessary to try to ensure this justified killing is legally justified and not just spiritually justified. When we talk about the scene as well, and you're looking at where Charles was, at least when that second shot went through him, you can see in the photograph to the right, the shot to Charles's chest, right between his nipples, and the shot to Charles's abdomen down lower. We know that that first shot through his chest, that Charles would have been facing a little more towards the open area there where we see the hallway and the kitchen. We know that because there was the bullet trajectory Detective Coons told you about that entered that far east wall. We know there was stippling, and so the defendant would have been, well, her brother would have been within 2 to 4 feet of the muzzle of that gun within Charles, 2 to 4 feet. We know from the lack of that injury to the back of his head that he didn't fall straight back. We know from the blood on his hand that he was still alive after he was shot. And we know the lack of stippling for that shot to his abdomen and that trajectory, and even the defendant's own statements that she saw her brother at Charles's feet, that he would have stood there at Charles's feet when he fired that second shot as he was laying on the floor. You have the bat, Exhibit 249. You can look at the edge of it. You see the photograph of the edge of it. There is no blood and no damage to this bat. Regardless of how many times the defendant was hoping that blood was invisible, we have all cut ourselves and seen that blood is red. And there was no blood on this bat. There is no blood on this bat. There is no damage to this bat. So you have a semi-professional baseball player who has a bat in his hand, and he sees someone with a gun and doesn't beat him with it, take his head off with it, knock him unconscious with it. Instead, all we see on this bat is 0 damage and 2 partial prints. No prints of a body or smushed skin on it. Someone that's sweating from a fight that's left a large arm print on it or anything else. Nope, just 2 partial little prints on it. When you think about what is there and what isn't there, does the evidence of this bat fit in at all? It doesn't. We look at Charles's watch. No damage to it, no scratches to it, no dings to it as he's grappling on the floor like Lori wants you to believe. We know that at some point, Charles is standing and shot, and we know that final shot, he's on the ground. We know he fell to his knees at some point. And when you look at that physical evidence and the lack of damage or anything on that bat, again, what makes sense is that Charles fell to his knees after that first shot. We know that there is 12 minutes where the defendant and her brother are still together there, so that Alex can get this 1-inch cut to the back of his head that's barely bleeding, that he uses a paper towel to dab at and rub. The shoes that the defendant ran out of on her way out. You have the exhibit. You can see black straps across her toes as she enters and exits the Walgreens. And then you see that she's wearing the flip-flops when she comes back to the scene. What do we know? That the police did not search Charles's rental car. Credibility. You are given a credibility instruction and you use it for everyone, including the defendant. You're told that you really evaluate people the same way. You're looking for any inconsistencies in their stories, any reasons why they may have a motive or bias to lie, any prejudice they may have, and then you look at everything in light of reason, common sense, and experience. When you think of the testimony of the people who come here and talk to you, Christina Atwood, Serena Sharp, Nancy Jo Hancock, Adam Cox, Dr. Bumgardner, the detectives, Robin Smith Scott, Mark Zari, what benefit do these people have in being untruthful to you? They have body cameras, they have prior documents, and they have memories of what this defendant said. But the credibility of Lori Vallow is something you do need to consider. And you start with her demeanor that day, where she wasn't worried about anything when she arrived. Her brother has allegedly been hit in the head with a bat by her husband, who plays semi-pro ball. She doesn't even worry about him. She knows he's not hurt. He's fine. And why does she know that? Because that was staged. When she's there and we see her on body cam arriving, she's just nonchalant and calm. And I know the defendant wanted to make sure that it was clear that everyone else was calm, but no one else had just allegedly seen their husband get shot and killed by their brother. When you were looking at the reasonableness of her testimony, you have to consider it in the light of reason, common sense, and experience. And the way that she was acting and reacting that day, as well as her own statements do not fit the evidence, do not fit the physical evidence. And you'll see her credibility throughout this whole case has been questionable. Her credibility with Social Security. What did we learn? That on July 11th, she tells Detective Enclan that she and Charles are separated. Exhibit 187. We are not living together. Charles rented her house. We're separated. But on August 12th, when she needs to make sure she gets some money, she tells Social Security, when they ask, are you living together at the time of death? Yes. You also learned that she was not truthful with Social Security when she got remarried. She did not tell them about that either. So we know she's been untruthful to Social Security twice. Why is that relevant? Because you're judging the credibility of Lori Vallow throughout all of this. Life insurance. We know that she said Charles was accidentally shot. We know that was not true. She wanted to make things seem like she had nothing to do with the murder. But we know that Alex Cox intentionally shot Charles. Whether or not she wants to claim it's self-defense or not, there was nothing accidental about shooting him twice. Then that second call to Banner Life Insurance, where she tells Robin Smith Scott a few different things to garner sympathy, and she asked her if she could do anything about the change in beneficiary.
I really can't give too much information, but I can tell you that the beneficiary was changed in March of this year. Okay. Okay, I'm trying to figure out what he was doing since we have 5 kids and we've been married for 15 years. Oh, I'm sorry.
So Lori tells this woman, we have 5 kids, which if you want to count them all and admit that 3 of them are adults, then okay. Really, they have 1 kid in common. Tylee, you learned, was actually getting Social Security survivor benefits from her dad's death starting in 2018. Lori's son, Colby, isn't living with them. Charles' son's never lived with them. Why does she say these things? She can't help it. She just wants to just make herself seem better than she is. What about the credibility of her interview, even during the police interview? We talked about a few things, but one of the things she told the detective.
That I didn't find anything or whatever. And then he filed something against me and said, I'm only going to get supervised visits because I'm crazy and blah, 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 you know, the story. And so I just didn't talk to him for like 30 days and let him take care of him and let him see what I've been doing.
So again, she can't even be honest and say 2 months. She got to have 30 days. I was kind enough to just leave my husband with my son for 30 days. What we know is that Lori Vallow was gone a total of 78 days, 58 while she's flying to Hawaii, going to Idaho and back with Chad. And who's taking care of JJ? Charles. And Kay is coming here regularly to help take care of JJ, to help run the business. And then eventually on March 28th, that finally decides he hasn't been able to find Lori. He doesn't know where she is. He's going to move to Houston to be closer so his sister can help him more easily. And this is when Lori finally shows back up. So again, even the simplest thing of just trying to be honest about how long she's been gone, she has to minimize it and make herself seem better.
With your cross.
The shoes. If this will play. When she was questioning Detective Enclan, she was asking her if it was hot in July and if she would need shoes to go take her son to school. But of course, what we know is that we saw her with those shoes on as she went into Walgreens. So again, it's continued trying to garner sympathy and just being untruthful about whatever she feels like being untruthful about. And then we look at the credibility and that timeline, that body cam.
You live here though, not in Santan. This is your home.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Gotcha. How long have you guys lived here?
Okay.
How long have you lived here?
Like 3 weeks.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Okay.
That's why the neighbors took us.
Gotcha.
Like, hi neighbor, sorry.
Are you working?
So here she is, 47 minutes after leaving the house, laughing and smiling with the detective about the fact that her husband is dead inside the house. Her brother is sitting on the curb, allegedly with this very serious injury from a baseball bat. When you look at that credibility of the defendant, you have to look at everything together and what fits, again, with the physical evidence and what doesn't. Finally, let's talk about the justification defenses. What we know is that Lori Vallow thought she was like Nephi, that she was justified in killing Charles. That her brother, who was supposed to be like her, was also justified in killing Charles. But Lori Vallow is not justified under Arizona law, nor is Alex. So let's go through the different justification defenses. First thing that you have to consider for every one of these, self-defense, defense of a third person, or crime prevention, is the non-justification for use of deadly physical force. You are told if a person is not justified in using or threatening physical force or deadly physical force against another in response to verbal provocation alone. So Charles yelling and screaming at her to give his phone back does not justify you shooting him. Or a person is not justified in using or threatening deadly physical force if the defendant or co-conspirator provoked the other's use or attempted use of unlawful physical force. So we know here Lori provoked Charles by taking his phone and refusing to give it back. So again, when we look at every one of these defenses, you'll see not only do they not apply, but none of them is the defendant entitled to. This is not self-defense. In self-defense, you're told that a person, a reasonable person, can use deadly physical force if they believe that deadly physical force was immediately necessary to protect against another's use or apparent attempted or threatened use of unlawful deadly physical force, and the person used or threatened no more deadly physical force than would have appeared necessary to a reasonable person in this situation. We know that Lori Vallow used Charles's phone to get him to come back inside, and she used his phone to keep him inside and give her brother time to come out and shoot and kill Charles. We know from the physical scene itself that Charles did not use a bat. We know from the physical evidence of Alex's 1-inch cut to his head and the lack of blood or concussion, the lack of damage to the mirrors, the walls, the location of the bat in relation to Charles, they all tell us that Charles did not use a bat. We know that Charles was a semi-professional baseball player. This would not have ended that way if he had had a bat. But even if you somehow think that he did have a bat and he was swinging it at Alex, the defendant, whoever, he still was not justified in shooting him when he was on the ground. It has to be immediately necessary to protect against another's use. When Charles is on the ground and he is shot that second time, there is no threat to anyone. And so that is not self-defense.
Counsel, I need to give my court reporter a break unless you think you'll be done in the next 5 minutes. Okay, go ahead.
When we look at the physical evidence, again, we know that Charles was on the ground, shot, and so this is not self-defense. And we know from the physical evidence at the scene, projectile into the floorboard, this is not self-defense. Third party. You're told that a person is justified in using or threatening deadly physical force in defense of a third person, I presume here Lori Vallow. If a reasonable person in this situation would have believed that deadly physical force was necessary to protect against another's use, again, of unlawful deadly physical force against a third person, and they used only what was necessary for a reasonable person under the situation. What do we know? Lori Vallow told Detective Enclam that she wasn't even in the room when she heard the shot, that she had gone around into the kitchen. Who's he protecting at that point? What third person that's no longer there is he protecting? You can't protect against a future, what might happen, or what already occurred. It has to be now. And Lori Vallow herself put herself outside the room when her brother shot Charles. So there is no third party defense. But again, the same thing applies. Even if you thought so, that second shot removes any possibility of being justified. Crime prevention. This is the exact same thing, only in a slightly different stated way. But like self-defense, it allows a person to use deadly physical force against another to the extent a reasonable person would have believed that deadly physical force was immediately necessary to prevent Charles from committing aggravated assault against Lori Vallow. We know she's not in the room. Even if he had that bat and had been coming at her and then she left the room, that crime is over. And again, even if you believe he had the bat, you cannot shoot him while he's on the ground. That is not what crime prevention permits you to execute a person. Finally, there's mere presence. You're told that guilt cannot be established by a defendant's mere presence at the crime scene, mere association with another person at the crime scene, or mere knowledge that a crime is being committed. Lori Vallow wasn't just present at this crime scene. She brought her brother to the crime scene. She ensured that he brought a gun with him. She ensured that JJ was outside, and she ensured that Charles stayed inside. She was not merely present. She was a person who was actively participating in this crime. Ladies and gentlemen, we have talked about the evidence in this case. Evidence that was presented to you through witnesses who took the stand and exhibits that were admitted for you to review. Remember the evidence of Lori Vallow's motive. Charles's life insurance, Chad Daybell. Remember Lori Vallow's own words of wanting to get rid of Charles, of drugging him, her acceptance of her brother's statements that he wanted to kill Charles, how she used Melanie and Summer to plan her mission and ensure that Charles didn't have help from Brandon or Zach or Adam. Her words to Alex about it all coming to a head, that he had to stay near her and they would be like Nephi, justified in killing Charles. And finally, her words to Chad Daybell on July 18th, confessing to the killing when she said Charles had changed the life insurance before we got rid of him. Look at her actions and demeanor, having her brother come over on the 10th to her house with a loaded .45 caliber handgun, creating the one and only reason why Charles stayed inside the house, why he didn't just take JJ to school. The 12 minutes that Charles is at the house before Lori leaves in the car, the 47 minutes after that before they call 911, her demeanor when she comes back, not caring that anyone has been hurt, her demeanor on the body-worn camera, during her interview, what you heard about during the drive. Think about her credibility, how she cried for you in her opening statement. You certainly didn't see her cry on that body camera footage. You didn't hear about her crying as she was being driven to the Family Advocacy Center, and you did not see her cry in her interview. Finally, think about the physical evidence that proves that Lori and Alex staged this scene, that Charles was never in possession of that bat when he was shot by Alex or either of the shots, that instead he was executed that day for this defendant's benefit. The physical evidence disproves beyond a reasonable doubt that Lori Vallow and Alex Cox were justified under the law in killing Charles. The jury instructions tell you to use reason, common sense, and experience. Charles Vallow is dead today because this defendant and her brother Alex Cox conspired to kill him. They planned it out, and they had their weapons, and they orchestrated a way to ensure that Charles was back in the house where he was shot and killed for money and Chad Daybell. The evidence proves to you that Lori Vallow Daybell is guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and the state asks you to hold her accountable and find her guilty. Thank you.
All right, we're going to take our 15-minute afternoon recess. I'll remind the jurors to remember the admonition. We'll resume in 15 minutes.
Whew. Trina K bringing the fire, but that was incredibly long, I do have to say. Very, very long. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward because I know we were a little bit behind on the feed. And again, thanks to Hidden True Crime, we are borrowing their feed because Court TV was behind. That's where I was originally trying to get the feed from. So that was an excellent closing. It was long. I am exhausted too. Thanks you guys for so many wonderful comments. Because of the length of this, I'm going to go ahead and do a separate recap after the closing statements are over, because I know there were a lot of people while I was in Arizona who commented how much they appreciated recaps without the trial coverage actually. And I know so many people who will not want to listen to Lori's voice for however long she goes on her closing. So I will definitely do a separate recap. The clock shows that we'll be back in 2 minutes and 35-ish seconds or so. So I'll go back in right when that comes back up. And then I will do a separate recap video after all of this is over. I'll probably take a break for myself and for Irish Jen and for everybody else whose ears need some breaks. And we need to take some deep breaths and get some sunshine and drink some water. So I really do want to go back through this. I took very detailed notes, but there were some times when I had to take a break from taking notes because I was feeling overwhelmed. So I was really glad that she did do a PowerPoint presentation with the videos. She replayed some of the witness testimony. I thought all of that was great, but it was definitely too long. And she did repeat a lot of things. And I think she did it for a reason. Like, I was really glad she lined it out for us in the very beginning that she was going to go over 3 main areas during this closing. And she very thoroughly did it. Sometimes you need to hear something multiple times before it really sinks in. And I know that's probably why she was getting repetitive with some of the points that she made. So I appreciate what she did. I'm not going to be critical at all. I do think it was too long. If I was a juror, I would probably be thinking, man, when are we getting to the end of this thing? But I think that the salient points that she really needed to lay out were there 100%. I love that she brought up the shoes. And somebody mentioned that was because of us. I mean, maybe it is, because a lot of you, after they showed that Walgreens footage, were like, she already had shoes on. So I'm glad she put that in there. So anyway, just about another minute here before the feed starts. I'm doing okay, but I'm admittedly overwhelmed. And also I do have to say, like, okay, everybody who loves me, who didn't want me to go to the trial, you're right. I can feel it in my body when I'm here at home in my own space. And I know how I normally feel here. When I was in Arizona, I don't think that I quite realized how much it was affecting me. I can feel it here. And yes, Eleanor Nelson, we are almost done. We're almost there. Justice for Charles is coming. We are almost there. I'm going to be okay. It's just a lot. So after this feed is over, I will do a separate recap. I will post the link for that in chat here as soon as it's ready to go. And I will see you over there whenever you're ready for a recap. And hopefully those of you guys who don't want to hear Lori Vallow's voice, if you don't want to watch this next part, I don't blame you at all. And, you can come for the recap and I will recap it without you having to listen to her. So I'll take good notes during Lori's closing, which I'm sure will not be that long because I don't think that she could possibly talk that long about all the evidence she did not present. So it looks like the feed is about to come back up here. So let me go quickly and see where we're at with that. Oh my goodness, the Pope died today. I can't even imagine. I'm so sorry for all of you who are Catholic people. When a beloved religious leader dies, it's really tough. All right, here we go, guys.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the state of Arizona has the 100% burden of proving that I committed a crime, a grievous crime, conspiracy to commit premeditated murder of my husband, Charles Vallow. The state has the burden of proving to you that this event was not self-defense. In your jury instruction under the instruction, use of force and crime prevention, the last line reads, if the state fails to carry this burden, then you must find the defendant not guilty. In the law, under your jury instruction titled Justification for Defense of a Third Party, the last line reads, if the state fails to carry this burden, you must find the defendant not guilty. Under your jury instruction titled Justification for Self-Defense, the last line reads, if the state fails to carry this burden, you must find the defendant not guilty. In your jury instruction under presumption of innocence, it states, the law does not require the defendant to prove innocence. Every defendant is presumed by law to be innocent. Under the burden of proof, it explains that the state's burden is this. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is proof that leaves you firmly convinced of the defendant's guilt. If, on the other hand, you think there's a real possibility that he is not guilty, you must give him the benefit of the doubt and find him not guilty. In Arizona, self-defense is defined as not being a crime. So let's look at what we've learned in this trial. We learned that a shooting occurred and that 911 was called, that law enforcement was notified. We learned that fire, EMS, and Chandler police arrived at the scene. We learned that my brother, Alex Cox, came out of the house with his hands up as directed by 911 and was questioned by the police in the driveway. We learned that I came up with my daughter Tylee, and we were told to wait by the car until police would speak with us. We learned from Detective Inklin on the stand that we asked for Tylee's medication from the house for her panic attacks, but it was not given to her. We learned that eventually my brother Alex was taken in a police car to the Chandler Police Department uncuffed. We learned in this trial that my daughter Tylee and I were also taken to Chandler Police Department in a police van. We heard from Detective Inklin's testimony that her goal was to make small talk with us. And
The jury will determine what the testimony did or did not show. Go ahead.
that her goal was to make the small talk with us and all the way to the station so she could speak with us separately before we would talk about what actually happened. We learned that all three of us were separated and taken to 3 interview rooms, where we each told police of the events of the day, each from our own perspectives, and answered all questions asked of us. We saw snippets of that interview in the trial here. The state did not show you the entire interview. Most of my police interview is admitted, though, into evidence in this exhibit. It's number 286. And I would encourage you to watch that entire interview when you start your deliberations. It is important. It is important for you to determine for yourselves my demeanor and not listen to anyone else. You can see it with your own eyes and hear it with your own ears. We heard from several witnesses that because this event was almost 6 years ago, that their memories of the events and statements were probably better back then. Well, my police interview happened that very morning, and I told the police the events from my perspective at that time. It is admitted into evidence and will answer many of your questions. You did not see Tylee's interview, but we did learn from Detective Inkland that she did an interview that morning as well. You did not see Alex's interview, but we learned that Alex was interviewed that morning by Detective Moffett, the original case agent, whom we did not hear from in this trial. The state chose not to show you those interviews or let you listen to the 911 call.
The jury shall disregard that last statement. Okay, the jury can only consider what was admitted into evidence.
We learned in this trial from Officer Kautheim's testimony that Alex was injured on the back of his head with a bump, and according to his testimony, a 1-inch laceration. We did not see those pictures documenting that injury as well. We learned in this trial that we did not know, the 3 of us, that our interviews were being recorded. We learned that Alex's phone was taken by police and put into an evidence bag, according to Detective Duncan, and that no digital copy of Alex's phone was taken by the Chandler Police Department, even though this is their normal protocol. We learned that Alex's phone was returned to him that same day with no further inquiries. We learned that after my interview and Tylee's interview that we were introduced to a victim's advocate and that gave us further instructions in another room where Tylee and I were reunited. We learned that soon after that, all 3 of us, Alex, Tylee, and myself, were taken in another van and dropped off back at our house. We learned that we were instructed at that time that we could not enter the house yet, that we were directed by law enforcement to take the rental car, since all 3 of our cars were inside the police tape. We were directed to return later in the afternoon when the scene was cleaned up. We learned in this trial that we did as directed and left the house in the rental car close to 12 p.m. We learned that we did not return to the house until contacted by Detective Inkland to return to the house so that Alex could walk the detectives through what they call a walkthrough. We learned that many detectives were present during that walkthrough with Alex. We learned that Detective Duncan was there, Detective Coons was there, Detective Moffett was there, Detective Werther was there, and an officer with a body cam was there. And yet, we were told by Detective Duncan, the case agent on this case on the stand, that because of some problem, the walkthrough is not recorded. Detective Duncan also informed us that he does not know if any of the people present wrote a report about it. We can infer from Detective Duncan's testimony and the fact that we don't have in evidence any body cam footage of the walkthrough and no reports talking about it, that there are none, even though this would be crucial evidence for you, the jury, to have.
Sustained, the jury should disregard that comment. Again, the jury can only consider evidence that was admitted into testimony. I'm sorry, testimony that was admitted into evidence or exhibits that were admitted into evidence.
The state of Arizona has the obligation to show you evidence to prove that this event was not self-defense, as stated by the only 3 witnesses. So why not show the jury all the evidence that they gathered?
Again, sustained. The jury can only consider the evidence and testimony that was admitted into evidence.
We learned in this trial that Alex fully cooperated with law enforcement. We learned that my daughter Tylee fully cooperated with law enforcement. We learned that I fully cooperated with law enforcement. We learned that law enforcement treated all of us that day kindly and courteously on July 11th, 2019. That law enforcement treated us that day like this was self-defense. We were not given instructions to stay in town. We were not given instructions that we were under investigation of any kind. On July 11th, 2019, we were interviewed by Chandler Police and released with no further instructions. We learned that Chandler Police put out a press release that day on July 11th.
I'll sustain that objection to the extent the jury is to determine what the facts did or did not establish.
Under Arizona law, I had the right to self-defense. Tylee had the right to self-defense. Alex had the right to self-defense. This event was not planned or expected. It was shocking. We learned in this trial that Chandler Police Department neglected to do a thorough investigation. We learned that they did not swab Alex's hands for gunpowder residue. We learned that they did not swab my hands for gunpowder residue. We learned that they did not swab Tylee's hands for gunpowder residue. We learned that they did not luminol the gun. We learned that they did not luminol the bat. They did not test the DNA on the bat that they collected. They did not test the floorboard. They did not test the projectile. They did not test my husband's shirt. They did not search the rental car. They did not search any of our 3 cars that were there at the scene. They did not test the gun until over 5 years later. The Chandler Police Department did treat this event just like it was self-defense and a tragic family event. We learned in this trial that Charles and I were obviously having marital problems. Regardless of what was happening in our marriage at the time, on July 11th, this was self-defense. When Tylee came out with the bat to protect me, her mother, Charles did not have to take the bat from Tylee and start swinging. At 62 years old, Charles had a choice that day and could have put the bat down. A 2-minute period changed our lives forever. How are you supposed to choose between 3 people you love? Your husband, your daughter, your brother?
All right, hold on. All right, I'll caution the defendant not to testify about things that were not entered into evidence.
How can you decide for another person if they feel threatened? Why does the state want to blame to someone?
It's a reasonable person standard, not the standard of the person.
I'm sure you'll point that out in rebuttal. I'll allow the argument as that inference. Go ahead.
Why does the state want to blame someone for this tragic event? What evidence did the state show you in this trial that I wanted harm to come to my husband? We learned in this trial that I was praying for my husband. We learned in this trial that even though my husband and I were having marital issues, that we were both trying to do the best things for our son with special needs, JJ. We learned in this trial that I was shocked that Charles had changed his life insurance policy, but I was not angry as the state alleges. In the phone call we heard from the insurance company, we heard that I was disappointed for our children, our grown children, as well as our children still at home, but I was not angry. My husband Charles was providing for our children still at home. I had no motive to change that. We heard a lot in this trial about the Book of Mormon prophet named Nephi. This is the state's evidence to murder over self-defense, and it is utterly ridiculous. We heard from Detective Duncan, who admitted on the stand that he had no idea what I meant in the text message when I said, "We will be like Nephi." In Mormon culture, Nephi signifies strong faith, perseverance, and courage.
Right. Sustained.
The state's attempt to misconstrue the positive text message about a wonderful religious figure, Nephi, and try to turn it into an order to kill someone is absurd. This is an attempt by the state to try to retrofit a crime that doesn't exist. This event was not a crime. It was a tragedy. Don't let them turn my family tragedy into a crime. When I'm done speaking to you, the state gets to get up and rebut all that I've told you. They've got to have the last word, so to speak, because it is 100% their burden to prove to you that I committed a crime. And you won't be allowed to hear from me again. So I want you to remember that it is the state's job to prove to you that I committed a crime. And if you have not seen the evidence that leaves you firmly convinced that I have committed this very crime, then the state failed to show you the evidence that you need. Because I did not commit this crime. The only interview the state entered into evidence is mine. So I encourage you to go watch it. I told you just what happened that day, just the way it happened. The state put forth a bunch of evidence in this trial in an effort to make you dislike me, to try to attack my character, so that you would just say guilty no matter what evidence they showed you. But only you get to decide. The state put up witnesses that had zero knowledge of a conspiracy. The state did not show you evidence of an agreement to commit murder. They showed you evidence of a family tragedy, and then they showed you the sad effects of a family torn apart because of that tragedy.
All right, the state does have the burden, so they have the right to open and close the argument. Do you want to give a rebuttal close? Go ahead.
The execution of Charles Vallow is not a family tragedy. There is nothing that you can say about shooting a man as he lay on the ground that you can try to construe in any way to make that a family tragedy. This case is about the defendant, not Alex Cox. Alex is involved in it because that is her co-conspirator. We are not here to determine his guilt, albeit it is quite obvious. This defendant wants you to just look at one piece, and she wants you to hope that there's only a person who will say, I saw, I heard the conspiracy. But what did you hear in every instruction is that you can look to other evidence to show that. This defendant wants you to forget about her words and pretend that when she told her lover, her soon-to-be husband, we got rid of him, that he changed the life insurance before we got rid of him, that somehow means what? That they killed him. And he changed his life insurance before they killed him. What does that tell you? That tells you motive, and that tells you who did it. This defendant is one of those because she's writing it. She wants you to pretend that when she is talking about Charles for months, acquiescing and agreeing to her brother killing him, having people tell her that it's wrong, having people know that they're planning something, that those words don't mean exactly what they are. We got rid of him, this defendant. The state, of course, has the burden, and that's how it should be. But every one of those justification defenses falls short when you look at the conspiracy itself. When they got rid of him, they did it by planning it. There is no reason that Alex Cox came over to this defendant's house with a loaded gun and waited for Charles to come inside, held there by this defendant using the cell phone. That is conspiracy. That is planning. That is premeditated. You can absolutely watch that whole video. That's why the state included that for you. What you're going to see is that Lori Vallow doesn't cry. She is not truthful, as we've gone through. Her timeline is absolutely wrong. She tells the detectives it's quick, it's 12 minutes. She wants you to believe that the police could understand all of this that day. But what did you hear? Is that all the police could tell initially was that the timeline was off. And then they started learning that the physical evidence seemed to be showing that Charles was executed on the floor, but they needed to see if the medical examiner agreed with them 2 days later. And then they needed to pull all those iCloud accounts, phone records, and go through terabytes of data to bring forth these things that you have now learned and hold. They interviewed these people who learned of the defendant's religious beliefs, that she was exalted, that she was celestial being, that she didn't have to repent. Of course she thought she was Nephi. We learned that the physical evidence on Charles and at the scene show us that he was executed. And every single one of those defenses that the defendant has asked you to look at, the state has met its burden. Because even if you somehow believe that Charles actually had that bat and it wasn't staged like the rest of the scene with the shoes and the lack of blood there, that second shot is not justified for self-defense, crime prevention, or third-party defense. Arizona law does not allow you to execute a man on the ground. The defendant wants you to believe she was shocked and surprised by this, and yet she goes wandering around, goes to Burger King, Walgreens, drops off her kid, comes back and jokes about her neighbors. Not one action of a person shocked, surprised. She wants you to feel bad for her daughter, Tylee. You saw her there. You heard from the detectives. She's also not shocked, crying, upset, worried. And you saw Alex. Same demeanor. Why? They've had 47 minutes to work it all out. Go through Charles's phone, figure out what they're going to say. They've talked on the phone twice in this time period. This case relies upon all of the investigation that the police did. That day, when they knew that timeline was wrong,
That day when they started to understand that the physical evidence at the scene was staged and wrong and didn't match what the defendant was saying. And then all of the evidence after that, culminating when this defendant told the man that she married later that she was having an affair with, as many times as she wants to say Charles was my husband. She didn't want him as her husband. She wanted Chad Daybell. She wanted that life insurance policy, and yes, she was angry about it. And she said, we got rid of him. That is her confession to you. That is why she is guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. Thank you.
All right. Do we have Izzy coming over? Izzy to be sworn in? All right, members of the jury, there are 14 of you, only 12 of you can deliberate. At this time, we're going to choose the alternate jurors by random lot here. So we have our scientific method here of random numbers. 14. Juror 14. Juror 5. I don't think you're 5. Well, maybe you are. Okay, so to the alternates, if I don't see you again, I want to thank you for participating in this process. The admonition still applies to you until we call you and tell you that it's been lifted. I have in the past had to have callback alternate jurors to testify or to deliberate when, for whatever reason, one of the jurors can't continue to deliberate, becomes sick, has a family emergency, etc. So you still could have to deliberate in this case. But again, if I don't see you again, I really do want to thank you for participating in this process. I know it might be somewhat of a disappointment to not deliberate right now, but we will keep you posted and we'll let you know if we need you. The remaining 12 jurors will retire to the jury room and begin your deliberations. First, we're going to swear in my staff.
Do you swear that you will take charge of this jury and protect their deliberations from all outside interference and communication? And when they have reached a verdict, you will bring them back into court without revealing the verdict to anyone, so help you God. I do.
Izzy, drop those off. Undrop those off.
All right, to the jury.
I will talk about which jurors were released here in just a second. I want to see if the judge comes back and says anything to the parties.
The jury's no longer present in the courtroom. I've passed out proposed aggravation phase jury instructions. In the event that there is a verdict of guilt, the state elects to proceed with an aggravation phase of this trial. So I'll let the parties review that. It's not too long.
Just stick on page 3. That's as a free.
Got it. All right, we'll be at recess until we hear from the jury.
All right.
Okay, guys, so sorry. Somehow my computer froze and I lost you there for a second, but we are back. I just want to say I do have a live stream already set up to go here in about half an hour to do the full recap for everybody who doesn't want to hear Lori Vallow's voice. I do want to talk just a little bit about who was released before I come back for the full recap. So I thought they did a great job on the rebuttal. It was amazing. And, I thought Lori's, actually, I do have to say that Lori's closing statement brought up some decent points. It's probably the most decent points that I've heard her make throughout the entire trial. So I am going to recap all of that. I just want to say about the jurors who were released, number 14 and number 5. So as they came in to the court every single day, I remember counting 1, 2, and then jurors 3 and 4 had previously been released. And so juror 5 was the next one. And so neither one of these jurors that have been released are women, and they're not fully released yet. They just aren't going to deliberate. And so they could be called back, the judge noted, just in case someone gets sick or can't continue with deliberation. So juror number 14 was in the front row. If you remember all of the sort of back and forth of the conversation that juror 15 and juror 16 had with each other, those were the two on the very end in the front row. So I know those two well. The one just before was juror 14. And if I'm not mistaken, that was not one of the women. I think the woman was on the end in the front row. So I think that was 2 men that got excused. And I had to laugh at Judge Boreski's scientific method of choosing which jurors were going to deliberate. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. And then I'm going to do a little bit of research here about the aggravation phase so that we know what they're talking about. We knew that this was going to be a possibility. And so I'm going to talk about that as well. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break. Let me get the link for you here real quick so that you can join us right away as soon as this next one is over. Sorry, I'm a little bit behind on getting that done because I was trying to take notes. Here's the link. I'm going to put it right down here in the chat. So you can go straight there and hit the notification, and then I will be there at the, I'll be there in about 30 minutes to recap both closing arguments and the rebuttal, as well as the jurors who've been excused and the deliberation. All of that I will recap in about 30 minutes right here on my channel. So go take a break, do some self-care, get out in the sun, drink some water. The jurors have not gone home for the day. They went back to deliberate. And if I'm not mistaken, the judge, they were expected to stay at court today until at least 4:30. That's an hour from now, Arizona time, or a half an hour from whenever, because we had the delay on the live stream. But so they had a minimum of an hour, if not an hour and a half, to deliberate before the day ends over there. And as to whether or not they will go farther or longer than that is up to the jury foreman, who they will choose when they get back to the jury room. So they'll choose a foreman, they'll begin their deliberations, and then how long they stay is kind of up to them. I would think personally, if I were on the jury, I would want to go over some of the evidence right away, and then I would probably want to break and come back first thing in the morning to hit the day hard and have, a nice long day of being able to go through all of that evidence with a fresh mind. So I'm going to go ahead and end for now. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your kindness and your support. Okay, so somebody reported that the jury went home. I will verify all of that for you, and I'll come back with it on my recap. Again, thank you so much for being here, and I will see you again in just about 30 minutes at the link that I already posted, and you can find it on my channel as well. Please take care, everybody. I'll see you soon.